Professor Dr. Muhammad Shahabuddin, Professor and Head of the Department of Cardiology, is requested to present his topic, our first topic, risk assessment for cardiovascular disease.
Honorable Chief Guest, respected Chairperson, respected and distinguished professors of different disciplines, panel of experts, my dear colleagues, students and friends, a very good evening and Assalamu alaikum. Today we will discuss about the primary prevention, that are the measures that have been taken to prevent the atherosclerotic cardiovascular complications. It is very much easy to treat the secondary causes or secondary events. Once upon a time, patient had the heart disease or CVT or peripheral vascular disease. It is very much easy to initiate antiplatelets and the lipid-lowering drugs and others measures, that is antihypertensive drugs, very easily. But it is not very easy to administer these drugs, that is antihypertensive, lipid lowering and the antiplatelet drugs to a person who is apparently healthy. So today we will discuss the strategies that are very much essential for the implications of these drugs to a apparently healthy individuals who are very much prone or risk for developing for cardiovascular events. So all healthy individuals should not undergo routinely this type of treatments, that is lipid lowering drugs, antihypertensive or antiplatelet drugs or other measures. But each and every individual must or should go through a process of healthy diet, weight reduction, smoking of preventions that will definitely benefit to these individuals who are leading a healthy life. This is very much essential. But it is not proven that which subsets of people will be benefited from which subsets of patients. So there is definitely a role for risk assessment of apparently healthy individuals. That's which are the people that will benefit more from the risk assessment. So the final question comes that the risk assessment. The risk assessment is a critical step in the current approach to prevent primary prevention of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. Knowledge of 10 years risk for atherosclerotic cardiovascular defines the patients with high risk group who are likely to be greater net benefit from the statin and antihypertensive drug. But these patients number is less, as because all patients do not require antihypertensive or antiplatelet or anti-cholesterol drug. Current US prevention guidelines for blood pressure and cholesterol management recommended the use of pull-pull equation to start a process of shared decision making between the clinicians and the patients for primary prevention. That is, they have used the pull equation for the detection of risk assessment. And this is popularly in our software-based program, SCBT Risk Estimator Plus. If you search on the Googles, that you definitely will get this SCBT Risk Estimator Plus. And this is the computer generated program. If you put the age, sex, race, high blood pressure, and the treatment option of blood pressure, cholesterol level, smoking habits, and the risk, they will calculate the risk quantitatively. And this will calculate quantitatively into a number that is less than 5%, less than 20%, 5 to 7%, and 7 to 20%. And this has been advocated that the percentage of many patients will get definite treatment modality. But if the question arises, the uncertainty regarding the intermediate groups or low or intermediate groups, then the secondary groups came forward to minimize this solution. These are the risk enhancer, family factor and others, inflammatory disorders. They will satisfy the question whether this patient will benefit from this subsets of treatment or not. If this is not sufficient to decide whether the patient will get benefit from this therapy, then the calcium coronary scoring system has been advocated by the recent preventive guidelines, and it has been introduced in 2013. From that, it was calculated that when a decision remains pending, then the calcium coronary scan, that is CT angiogram, will dictate the presence or absence of treatment with anti-cholesterol regimes. But for one patient, regardless of absolute risk, appropriate lifestyle modification, as for example, a smoking cessation, weight modification, a healthy dietary pattern, and participation in physical activity should be recommended. It is essential for all patients that these sorts of measures, that is smoking cessation, weight modification, and dietary pattern, particularly physical activity, should give benefit to all patients irrespective of their status. And this is the whole cohort equation. This is a bit lengthy, a bit clumsy, and it is not clear for all the general peoples that we are in these sites. This is a cohort group that has been used in 5 general populations of white and black men and women, 4 research groups patients. And from these groups of patients, they recommended the age, sex, and racial factors. And existing use derived risk score for cardiovascular risk reduction. It is pool cohort equation. And 2018 cholesterol clinical practice guideline and 2017 hypertension practice guideline recommended the use Dept pool cohort equation as PCE to estimate the 10-year risk for heart atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease event. That means death and fatal and non-fatal strokes and MI. They have used this pool cohort equation to the patients. When there is decision is pending, that's because there is primary prevention as we. And these are the points that has been incorporated in pool cohort equation. That is age, sex, race, as I was told earlier. That is total cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, systolic blood pressure, antihypertensive therapy, history of diabetes mellitus, and current smoking status. All these are computer generated program. If we put all this together, they will calculate the risk to high risk more than 20%, low risk less than 5%, and intermediate risk 7.5 to less than 20%, and low risk that is 5 to 7%. And the outcome was assessed in the cardiovascular death, non-fatal MI, and fatal strokes. And it is age and sex and race specific. 4 groups as white women and white men, black men and black women were included in this group. And then it is available on online. That was very popular online shops that I have mentioned earlier. That is SCBT Risk Estimator Plus. if you click on estimated risk estimator plan, they will give this data. And what are the recommendations from this food cohort equation? Please remember, this food cohort equation is applicable only for primary prevention. If a patient has maybe heart disease, or a patient has CVD or other atherosclerotic established disease, this food cohort equation is not applicable for those. All the patients who are very high risk for this development of atherosclerotic disease, they are not included in this group. As because you say for a patient came to you with a very high LDL level, more than 190, there is no need for calculating this equation. Only they will high level, individual high level of this LDL is sufficient to start the anti-cholesterol treatments. At the same time, the patient with diabetes, which is also a category for high risk groups. So these are the patients, these are not included in this primary prevention protocols. If we consider, if we discuss these things, it will be very clear to us. The adults for 40 to 75 years of age, please remember this age group, that is 40 to 75 years of age. And the clinician should routinely assess the traditional risk factors and calculate 10 years risk for atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease by using the pool cohort equation. This is class 1 indications that every patient of 40 to 70 years routinely will have to determine the pool cohort equation as a risk stratification. But patient with 20 to 39 years of age, it is reasonable to estimate the traditional risk factor at least 4 to 6 years. And in younger patients below 40, it is recommended to calculate the at least 30 years risk or the total lifetime risk. Yes, because the age is a factor that undermines the pool cohort equation to a low level. In US population, they have found that when a younger patient less than 40 years, they have calculated 10 years risk, it is less than 5. But when it is calculated for 30 years risk or lifetime risk, it becomes more than 39 to 40%. So, in younger patients, you will have to determine the whole lifetime risk assessment, and it will decide your, it may definitely, it may reclassify the patient to a higher group than that was decided in 10 years risk assessment. So, in younger patient, lifetime assessment or at least 30 years risk assessment is necessary. As we have said earlier, that is risk assessment, 5 to 7% of atherosclerotic cardiovascular, it was designated at low risk, and intermediate risk 7.5 to less than 20%, and more than 20% it is a high risk group. In the adults with intermediate risk, that is 7.5 and less than 20% of atherosclerotic risk, selected adults at borderline risk decision of preventive measures, that is a statin therapy, remains certain. It is reasonable to measure the coronary calcium score that to guide the statin therapy. And if patient is in intermediate group, that is risk is 7.5 to less than 5, but there is a indecision between the initiation of treatment and not to treatment. In this situation, the risk enhancer, family history or others comorbid condition may dictate your therapy. If this is not as sufficient enough, you may go for coronary calcium scoring. So, coronary calcium scoring is one of the essential tools for deciding which patient will benefit. And I will discuss the later one, the coronary calcium score. That is, if it is less, that is it's 0, still it recommended there is no statin therapy except in few conditions. That is, if there is a strong positive family history and patient is diabetic and patient is a smoker, though the calcium score is 0, you will have to initiate or you will have to consider for statin therapy. So calcium score 0 does not guarantee any no therapy except in a special situation. Now the last portion, the adults with 20 to 39 years of age and those with less than 7.5% atherosclerotic risk estimate lifetime or 30 years risk may be considered. So I have said earlier that a younger group that is less than 40 years, they have to calculate either 30 years risk or lifetime risk. This is also a computed generated program. And when decision remains unclear, these are the things that will dictate your therapy. This is the risk enhancing factors. It is simply the multiple comorbid conditions that are encountered by patients. That is family history of premassive atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. It's a very important thing. A patient with a strong positive family history and a patient without a strong positive family, the occurrence of atherosclerotic cardiovascular events is more and more to the patients who have the positive family history. And the next, primary hypercholesterolemia. If the cholesterol level remains high in a person that is familiar hypercholesterolemia, it should be under treatment. And metabolic syndromes, that is increased weight or triglyceride level and waist circumference, that is in metabolic syndrome, it will have hypertension and it will have to undergo treatment. Chronic kidney disease that was not on dialysis and transplantation, and chronic inflammatory disease. These are the conditions that psoriasis and rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, HIV and AIDS. These are the chronic inflammatory diseases that have to consider for initiation or reclassification of mild or low intermediate group patients for initiation of cholesterol therapy. And it is again continuing history of premature menopause, high risk, race and ethnicity, especially in Asian regions, and lipid biomarker associated with increased cardiovascular risk, and persistently elevated primary hypertriglyceridemia, more than 170 milligram per day, and non-fasting. It's also a persistent level of hypertriglyceridemia. It's also a risk enhancing factor. We usually consider that triglyceride level, it is less than 200, it is not harmful to you. But if it is persistently elevated to a patient, it should be considered. And other things that has been measured, that is elevated high sensitivity C reactive 4.2, elevated lipoprotein A and elevated apolipoprotein B, and ankle-radial index less than 9. These are the emerging new risk biomarker that has incorporated in cholesterol level guidelines. These are newer, and there are other newer biomarker markers coming in the next guidelines that will dictate the cholesterol guideline therapy. Now the question comes with the high blood cholesterol. What to do with the high level of cholesterol in adults with intermediate risk, that is 7.5 to 10. As because I am telling like that, if the blood cholesterol level remains very high, that is more than 190, it needs no risk stratification. It's go directly for lipid lowering drug. But if the lipid level is within normal ranges, but the intermediate risk, that is 7.5 to less than 20, 10 years risk, statin therapy reduce the risk of atherosclerotic cardiovascular death. And the context of this discussion is the decision is made for statin therapy. A moderate intensity statin should be recommended. That is in moderate group, more than 7.5, statin therapy should be initiated, that is moderate reduction. Intermediate group, that is 7.5 to less than 20, 10 years risk, patient of LDL level should be reduced at least by 30% or more. And for optimum severity reduction or more than 50%, if the risk is more, that is more than 20%. Here we decide there is two things. If the risk is very high, that is it is atherosclerotic cardiovascular risk is more than 20%, we will have to reduce the cholesterol more than 50%. But if it remains less than 20% and more than 7.5%, it should be reduced at least 30%. In adults 40 to 75 years of age with diabetes, regardless of the estimated 10 years estimated risk, moderate intensity statin therapy should be initiated by indicated. So any patient with diabetes age 40 to 75, moderate intensity statin therapy should be initiated, provided the blood cholesterol remains 72, less than 189. As because it is, if it is more than 190, it is requires no calculation. But when the patient is diabetic, it requires no risk assessment. Only risk assessment is necessary. Whether to start with high dose statin, the aggressive lipid lowering, that whether we should introduce high intensity statin therapy or we will start with moderate dose intensity therapy. For that reason, you will have to calculate the risk. Otherwise, in diabetic patient, it should not be assessed. So again, in patient with 22, I think it's a bit clumsy for the general peoples who are listening. I try to clear it in the next slides. It is very easy to memorize or something from that subsequent slides. But in patient with 20 to 75 years age with LDL cholesterol more than 190 or higher, a maximum tolerated statin therapy is recommended. So if the cholesterol remains very high, that's more than 190, it should not go under any clarification or any risk stratification. You will have to start at the statin therapy. And in adults with diabetes mellitus who have multiple SCVD risk factors, it is reasonable to prescribe the high intensity statin therapy to reduce the LDL cholesterol more than 50% or more. That I have said earlier, that is, you will have to calculate the risk stratification only in diabetic patient to increase the reduction. That is, it will be moderate intensity or high intensity. Moderate intensity will reduce the cholesterol 30% and high intensity will reduce the cholesterol at least 50% or more. In intermediate risk group, that is 7 to 20% of the adult, risk enhancing factors favor the initiation or intensification of the statin therapy. Again, the risk enhancing factor that we have seen earlier, they can reclassify for initiation or re-stratifications of the statin therapy. And in intermediate group, that is cholesterol risk is more than 7 and less than 20, 10 years, and adults selected borderline, that is 5 to 10 years, in whom a coronary calcium score is measured for the purpose of making the treatment decision. And this is the intermediate group where the cholesterol remains low, but the atherosclerotic cardiovascular risk, again it is intermediate. They have risk enhancing factors that does not give you the clue to initiate the cholesterol lowering therapy. Then what to do next? You have to measure the coronary calcium score, that is CT angiogram. And the CT angiogram will dictate your result. If the CT angiogram is 0, except in diabetic and heavy history and a smoker, you may not prescribe any lipid lowering drug. If the calcium score more than 100, you will have to prescribe the lipid lowering drug. And in between 99 to 1, it should be initiated the lipid lowering drugs. And lastly, the inpatient with the borderline risk, that is 5 to 10 years, risk discussion, the presence of risk enhancing factor may justify the initiation of moderate intensity therapy. And this is the final slide of primary prevention of lipid lowering. If you look at the If you look at the top, yeah, that is if the LDL cholesterol is very high, but is more than 190, you will have to initiate the lipid lowering drug. If it is a diabetic patient, you will have to reinitiate again. You will have to initiate the lipid lowering therapy. Only you will have to calculate risk stratification in diabetic patient for initiation of moderate to higher intensity statin therapy. And if the patient is more than 75 years, clinical assessment is necessary for initiation of lipid lowering therapy. It may not be required in more than 75 years of age. And left hand side, if age is 0 to 19 years, that is very young patient. These are risk factors. Only the familial hypercholesteremia will be sufficient for initiation of statin therapy. Otherwise, we may not need any statin therapy. Only the risk estimation or risk factor modulation or lifestyle modification is sufficient. And this portion, and again, if this is a very risk stratification from 40 to 75 years, and LDL cholesterol less than 90 and more than 70, and without diabetes mellitus, can has, because if this patient group have diabetes mellitus, he will go directly from the statin therapy. But patient is not diabetic, patient LDL cholesterol not more than 190. In that situation, we will have to do the pool code equation by risk stratification. And if this risk stratification, again, it is very high, more than 20%, it will get benefit from the statin therapy. If it is very less, that is less than 5%, it will get benefit from the primary prevention, that is on a drug and exercise and weight control and things. With this bitemporal management, in one side more than 20%, they will benefit from the lipid lowering therapy. On the other hand, less than 5%, he will benefit from the he will benefit from the risk factor modification or physical exercise, weight or diet control. But in between this group, that is intermediate group, where the risk is 7.5 and less than 20, this group, again, we have to search for the risk enhancing factors. If the risk enhancing factors are present, then they will dictate your therapy. And if the risk enhancing factor is still absent, then you will have to go for coronary calcium scoring. If the coronary calcium scoring is 0 or 1 or more than 100, they will dictate your therapy. And at the same time, so that's the intermediate group, you may start with the statin therapy if the risk enhancing factor is there. This is the final slide of initiation of statin therapy in primary prevention. I have covered the statin therapy, and they are the risk enhancing factor in case of diabetic patient, because diabetic patients are very much prone for developing the atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. If it is type 2 diabetes, that is more than 10 years, and in type 1 diabetes more than 20 years, they are considered as enhancing factors. Albuminuria more than 30 gram per picogram per milligram creatinine, and eGFR less than 60 ml per minute per 1.7 millimeter square. Either it is retinopathy, neuropathy, or ankle brachial radix more than 0.9. These are the risk enhancer in diabetic patients for diabetic populations. Now the question from the therapy in blood patients. According to American College of Cardiology and the European Society of Cardiology, there is a little difference among the treatment protocols. In European Society of Cardiology, they have recommended that the blood pressure goal should be less than 140 by 90. But if this goal is tolerated by the patient, it should be reduced to 130 by 90. But in case of American College of Cardiology, they have recommended from the spring trial that the blood pressure value should be less than 130 by 80. If we summarize both the guidelines, we find that the main thing is saying that the target of blood pressure is less than 130 and 80 or equal to. And we will discuss about the American College of Cardiology and if a patient having blood pressure high, that is 140/90, it is directly patient will benefit from antihypertensive treatment according to American College of Cardiology protocol guideline. But it may not be same in case of European Society of Cardiology. According to American College of Cardiology, blood pressure has been divided in 4 strata. That is normal, high normal, stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 2 means the blood pressure more than 140/90. If you can diagnose a patient blood pressure more than 140/90, you will have to start the non-pharmacological treatment along with pharmacological treatment. So class 2, stage 2 hypertension must benefit from the antihypertensive treatment along with non-pharmacological treatment. Regarding the normal patients, when the blood pressure remains very low, that is 120/80, it's definitely benefited from the non-pharmacological management or follow-up. In high normal patients, when blood pressure remains 120 to 139, 129 and blood pressure less than 80, this group is a high normal blood pressure. These patients definitely benefit from the risk factor reduction and non-pharmacological management. But in stage 1, this is the question, whether this patient will be benefited from non-pharmacological management or pharmacological management. This is the final crucial point, that we will have to divide this stage 1 hypertension, that is blood pressure systolic 130 to 139 and diastolic blood pressure 80 to 89, that is less than 90. We will have to decide whether patient will be different, and this will be subsequently we will have to do the SCD risk score. If the risk score in this group is more than 10, this patient will benefit from the pharmacological therapy. But if the score is less than 10, it will not benefit from the drug therapy, and simply for the risk management and non-pharmacological management. So, I am coming to the final point. In adults with elevated blood pressure or hypertension, including those with antihypertensive medication, non-pharmacological intervention are recommended to reduce bleeding. These include weight loss, healthy dietary pattern, sodium reduction, dietary potassium supplement, increased physical activity with start exercise, and limited alcohol. I think Dr. Shishir will discuss each and everything in subsequent exercise. And number 2, in adults with estimated 10 years risk, 10% or higher, and average systolic blood pressure 130 or higher, and diastolic blood pressure 80 or higher, use of BP lowering medication is mandatory for primary prevention. That is in stage 1, if the SCVD risk score is more than 10, it will go in stage 2 hypertension, that the patient will get benefited from drug treatment. And in patient confirmed hypertension and 10 years SCVD risk 10% or higher, BP target should be less than 130 and 80. If it is kidney disease or hypertension, again the blood pressure will be 130 and 80. And in adults with estimated 10 years risk less than 10 and systolic blood pressure less than 140 or higher more than 90 millimeter of mercury, and initiation of BP lowering drug should be recommended. Here it is stage 2, that is blood pressure more than 140 and 90. It requires no risk stratification. Directly you will have to go for pharmacological management. And in adults confirmed hypertension without additional marker of increased SCVD, blood pressure target less than 130 may be reasonable. So this is the final slide for blood pressure control. We have divided the blood pressure in 4 groups: stage 2, stage 1, high elevated blood pressure and normal blood pressure. If we consider the bitemporal management, that is, if it is stage 2, that is blood pressure 140/90, there is no question for risk stratification. You will have to start the antihypertensive treatment along with pharmacological management. But if the blood pressure remains 120/80, there is no need for any therapy. That's follow. But if the blood pressure is 120 to 129 and the diastolic blood pressure is less than 80, it is elevated blood pressure. Only the systolic blood pressure is elevated, only a very few, that is less than 129 millimeter of mercury. In American College of Cardiology, they have recommended the non-pharmacological therapy for this state. But the question is here, it is blood pressure is 130 to 139 and diastolic blood pressure is 8 to 29. And you will have to divide this group into two portions. If the SCVD risk factor is more than 10, they will benefit from this group of treatment, that is pharmacological management. But if the risk score is less than 10, they will benefit from the non-pharmacological management. So in final, that patient with stage 1 hypertension, that is blood pressure 130 to 139 and diastolic blood pressure 8 to 29, will have to divide this patient in two groups, either on the basis of the SCVD risk estimation. But remember, if the patient has secondary atherosclerotic cardiovascular complication, but patient has MI or unstable angina or other diabetic, definitely you will benefit directly from the pharmacological management. This concept is only for those who have not any established atherosclerotic cardiovascular diseases. So here we conclude the treatment option for hypertension. This is the non-pharmacological treatment. I think Dr. Shishir will discuss everything. Regarding the aspirin, this is the new concept, the aspirin. Previously it was thought that aspirin plays a tremendous role in primary prevention, but the outlook has been changed. And they have recommended not to use routinely aspirin over the 70 years as a case of primary prevention. So, and low dose aspirin, that is 75 to 100 milligrams, should not be administered for primary prevention among the adults who are at the increased risk of bleeding. So, if the patients are increased risk of bleeding, they should not undergo primary prevention with aspirin. Only aspirin is indicated in class 2B. Low dose aspirin may be considered for primary prevention of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease in selected patients of 40 to 70 years who are at the higher SCVD risk but not increased bleeding risk. You will have to calculate both the factors, that is bleeding risk and the benefited from the antiplatelet therapy. So this is the new change from 2019 guidelines in primary prevention of use of aspirins. So future direction is that further pool cohort study with increased biomarker and the available research data will dictate most pool cohort studies in future. So in summary, we can calculate the pool cohort study into the different groups. With high risk group, they will be benefited with lifestyle along with the drug therapy. If it is low, that is it is less than that, it will only the lifestyle modification. And in between, that is 20 to 5, you will remain in borderline or intermediate group. You will have to try to readjust the risk enhancing factors and others diabetic or other factors that are sufficient for addressing this condition. If it is not sufficient for addressing this condition, that is family risk enhancing factors or diabetics or other conditions, then you will have to go for coronary calcium scoring. So this is the final chart or final risk estimator. That is the main money thing that was in my chapter. That is risk estimation and the application of risk estimation in clinical practice. And I think it has been already been told that what is the interpretation of calcium scoring. And this the take-home message, that first take-home message is the most important way to prevent the atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, heart failure, atrial fibrillation is to promote healthy lifestyle throughout life. There is no question regarding this. Second, you will have to calculate the risk of 40 to 70 years of age are being evaluated for cardiovascular disease prevention, and 10 years atherosclerotic risk for estimation of clinician and patient risk discussion before starting a pharmacological therapy such as antihypertensive therapy, statin or aspirin. There is a decision in between the patient and the clinician, and there must be a clear indication for use of these drugs. You will have to clearly define this use of this drug, or you will have to intensify these drugs. And statin therapy is the first line treatment for primary prevention of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease in patients with elevated low density lipoprotein, that is more than 190 milligram per day, and those with diabetes who are 40 to 70 years of age, and those determined to be a sufficient SCVD risk after the clinician and the patient risk discussion. Again, if the statin level is very high, it will have to start statin, or in diabetic patient you will have to start in. And if it is not in the range, then intermediate risk group will be benefited from non-pharmacological intervention recommended in all patients with elevated blood pressure and hypertension. And for those with pharmacological therapy targeted blood pressure less than 130 by LT. And lastly, the aspirin. Aspirin should be used infrequently in the routine primary prevention of severity risks because the lack of net benefit. With this word, I like to conclude here. Thank you very much for patience hearing. I think it is a bit complicated, a bit not so palatable for work, but I have tried my level best to make it very much clear to you. Thank you very much.